Hello, my name is Louise Aukland, and I'm a researcher and public engagement coordinator at the University of Oxford Mindfulness Centre, which is part of the Department of Psychiatry. I work on the Myriad project. Myriad stands for My Resilience in Adolescence, and we're looking at how schools prepare young people for their emotional health and to improve resiliency. And in particular, we're investigating the underlying cognitive mechanisms, teacher training pathways, and the effectiveness of teaching mindfulness to adolescents in secondary schools in the UK. Alongside that, we have a number of public engagement activities that I'll be talking to you about in a moment. So where was I when the Berlin Wall fell? Well, I was still at school and I was studying for my national exams. I had just been to Germany on a German exchange, and my German exchange partner, Katrin, sent me a tiny little piece of the Berlin Wall. I was also particularly keen at the time on Pink Floyd, and so when they did the live event based on the Wall album, I remember being glued to the TV and watching that and being fascinated by the whole thing. And in fact, doing this film made me reflect a little bit on some of the themes that were in that event that perhaps we're looking at quite a bit now in Myriad in terms of social isolation and depression and so on. So I always wanted to work in the conservation of tropical rainforests. I was particularly keen on this area. I was a bit of an environmentalist when I was young and campaigned, and I was a WWF member. So that was what I always wanted to do. And interestingly, that's a very long way from what I do now. But for the first about 6 to 7 years of my career, that's exactly what I did do. I trained as a biologist, then as a forester, and I worked in environmental securities and carbon trading in the early days of the Kyoto Protocol. And so was looking at conserving natural forests across the world and how we can finance that. So I guess you could say that that wish did come true. I just then changed my wish. The Myriad project aims to break down the wall around mental health and well-being, and in particular the role that mindfulness can play. Mental health problems commonly have their first onset during the adolescent years, and in fact 1 in 8 young people suffer from a mental health disorder. That's equivalent to about 3 or 4 per classroom in the UK. And despite this, conversations really are only just starting to open up around this, and it's still very difficult for young people to get support if they need it. We have a program of activities to engage young people, an interactive workshop around the research into the teenage brain, a young researcher challenge, and a co-developed digital resources project and campaign for looking at young people's ideas around mindfulness. So well-being, and in particular mindfulness, is fraught with cliches and misconceptions and misunderstandings. And what we try to do at Myriad is to encourage young people to talk about well-being and mental health through the lens of science, through drawing on neuroscience and the psychological sciences, using scientific method, and keeping a critical eye on the evidence. And it has the potential to shift attitudes and change mindsets in a field of science that is not necessarily considered as science by our public. Well, our research focuses on the adolescent years, and it felt crucial to us to ensure that we were taking account of young people's views on mental health and well-being in our research. So we encouraged them to help us design some questionnaires, but also we wanted to inspire an interest in young people in the science around mental health, well-being and mindfulness. We also have a large number of early career researchers, and this was a great opportunity to give them the opportunity to develop their skills in public engagement. Well, what surprised us was actually the real disconnect between what young people thought was important and what the researchers thought. So there's been real value in having those informal discussions with young people rather than just following the strict rigors of research protocols. It's also been incredible as to how much excitement and curiosity can be generated by just stepping inside an inflatable brain. So my initial reaction here is to say our inflatable brain, which is about 7 meters long. You can get about 15 young people inside and have really exciting and interesting discussions around the brain's role and neuroscience's role in emotional and behavioral regulation. However, I also think our Young Researcher Challenge is pretty unique. And that's because the questionnaire that came out of the Young Researcher Challenge was designed by young people, questions that they thought were important to ask other young people. And it was inserted into our main trial set of questionnaires. It's since been completed by over 5,000 young people and has produced a really unique data set around young people's views on mental health and well-being. So about 7,000 young people in the UK have been involved directly in our engagement activities. And this is across about 84 schools involved in our research trial. We have just developed 2 sets of resources, interactive resources based on our teenage brain workshops. So that's around the teenage brain and the psychological research around teenage brain. And the other is called MyPad, so Myriad Young People's Data Analysis. And this includes a large data set, films by researchers, and teacher and student resources around this, aimed particularly at 16 to 18-year-olds, where they might design their own research project or work within the class context to look at research methodologies associated with the psychological sciences. So we hope that with these resources, we can have a much broader reach and encourage much more open discussions around mental health and well-being, and in particular mindfulness, and perhaps even play a small part in increasing flourishing amongst young people. So I thought for this one that we might ask my own children. So here we have Charlie and this is Laurie. And so let's ask them, what do you think of my project?
Well, I think that it's good that you're trying to get teenagers to learn about the brain, and that it's good that you're making it fun, not boring, with the fun worksheets.
I think it's really good as well because we need to know about the brain, and we're not being taught about it in primary, and I've been in secondary for about a year, well, half a year because of quarantine and lockdown, but I hadn't heard anything of it apart from my mum.
Okay, there you go. So we still have to find out what the data shows, both in our main trial looking at mindfulness in schools versus teaching as usual, but also the data created by our Young Researcher Challenge, which is all part of the MyPad data set. So we're really interested to hear from young people about what they think that data shows. What questions does it still ask? And what will the young people think about the trial results? So there's still lots more questions for the next couple of years of our research program. Working with young people can be quite difficult. Working with schools can be quite challenging. It's not always easy. It's time consuming. It requires additional paperwork to be completed. It's costly. It requires checks and so on. And sometimes I think there is a temptation to just move forward, to make decisions as researchers, and to not really engage the young people fully. And so for me, what keeps me awake is finding the right balance. Have we found the right balance in our engagement project versus the core research? And have we really taken account of the young people's views enough? I don't know. I hope we have, but that's what keeps me awake.